CFO here at the OPI, and he's going to be presenting to us on the ESSER $2 and the details around that. I wanted to let everyone know we are recording today's session so that we can post it on our website and share the data with those who weren't able to join us. So the recording has started. And with that, Mr. Bailey, please take it away.
Good morning, everyone. As said, I'm Ken Bailey, and I'm the CFO here at OPI. And we're going to go over a couple things with both ESSER 1 and ESSER 2. Mindy Askelson, who is in our centralized services unit, will be covering part of this, and I'll be covering the rest. I want to again ask everyone to stay muted, and any questions asked in the chat area, we'll keep an eye on that and try to respond to everyone. After this is over, we will post this recording as well as the PowerPoint slides that we're doing. So the first thing I want to do, and this is actually just to, as a way of an introduction, and we'll go through some of this as we go through here, but I want to start by just sharing my screen and showing you guys that we refer to this and there's links and everything, but if you go to our website and you click on reopening schools and you kind of scroll down to where it says school finance, you see the big ESSER info button and click on it. And again, in the presentation, I have a direct link to here, but I just want to say, anytime that you have questions about ESSER, this should be the first place that you start. And in these three buttons, for example, you'll see this last document is the ESSER 2 grant deadlines. If you go to districts, the last one will show you all of the allocations for the ESSER 1, and then what we've done so far on ESSER 2. And if you go to fund coding, you'll find a document has been posted about how to account for ESSER 2 funds when they become available. Okay, so let me before I get into this, let me just first of all ask Mindy Askelson to introduce herself, and then I'll screen share and start the slide deck, but I know it's always good to get an idea of who you're talking to. So Mindy?
Hello, everybody, and thanks for calling in this morning. As Ken said, I am Mindy Askelson, and I am, I think, on the cusp of still being a newbie here at OPI. I came over, I think, in like October or something like that. And my role right now is working both with eGrants and working with the ESSER 1 and 2 funds. If you do have questions about ESSER, either you're having trouble with eGrants or figuring out what you need to do with it, just give me a call and I can help you with either or. As I've been telling people, I know about 14 things right now. So if one of the questions you ask me is beyond those 14 things, I may have to give you a call back after I phone a friend to get the information I needed. Also, too, what I can help you out with is if you're struggling a little bit with the guidances and you're not clear on what's something that you think may need to be approved, just give me a call too. I'm the person that's working with the cash approvals too. So if I send you something that you just don't quite understand, don't hesitate to give me a call and we will work it out, and I'll explain what I need and we'll work it out the best we can. So it was nice meeting you all, and I hope to hear from you all soon. All right, Ken.
Okay, and let me try and find the webinar. Okay. Hold on one second. I'm not the best at this. Okay, so does everyone see that now?
Yes.
Okay. And I need to, my things are coupled here, but I want to go to slideshow. Okay, and it's all yours. We're going to start with ESSER and ESSER related reporting. All yours, Mindy.
All right, you have to excuse me right now. The slide is being taken over by a give a subtitles try that Ken, I think you have on your screen. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, I don't know how to
Okay.
get rid of it.
Just do turn on and you should.
Okay.
All right. And then, yeah, okay. So first of all, I want to thank all of those who did complete the ESSER annual report survey that we sent out. If you have not, we're asking you please to get it done as soon as possible. We put it down for close of business as of yesterday because our entire report needs to be into the feds by February 1st. I have worked with a lot of federal grants and they're assuring us that the upload of the information is going to be smooth, which I have worked with a lot of grants and kind of question that. So we might be coming back to you to ask for more information, but I doubt we will. So if you have not finished the survey, please have it done. The second thing is having it due on February 1st. What we have been told in several of our conversations with our federal co-workers is there is no push room or leeway on this February 1st. It has to be in there by then, and they will go with whatever is in there as of February 1st. So it's a deadline. I'm sorry, we just cannot negotiate. What you also need to know is that originally we had told everyone, if you hadn't spent the money before October 1st, you were fine, don't worry about it. We then got clarification from the feds and their request was no, even if people have not been given money within that time frame, they still would like them to answer the survey, particularly the last page where it talks about FTEs. So does anyone have any questions about the report or have gotten in and not been able to do it? For those schools that have not yet done it, just give you a little piece of advice. What you'll need to have available is your DUNS number and FTE counts for the district and amounts spent if you did spend money and get and do a cash request before October 1st. Does anyone have any questions? All right, Ken, I will send it back to you.
Yeah, I do have a question.
Okay.
Last week we were told that we did not need to submit the report as we had not drawn, and that is now changed, that we do indeed need to complete the annual report survey.
Yes, that is true, due to the new information we received from the feds.
And if I could add a note, what that means is you basically put zeros in for all the financial data. And really the only thing you have to enter is the FTE data.
And just a clarification on the FTE, they are asking for all employees, not just teachers or individuals who have COVID-related contracts. All right, Ken, let's go to you.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about ESSER 2, and I know there's a lot of interest in a lot that has been said, and these are the basics. Montana has already been awarded $170.1 million. 90% of that, or $153 million, will go directly to school districts, and that allocation is based on this year's Title I allocations. So within OPI, the people who do the Title I allocation did the allocation of these ESSER dollars, and that's where that comes from. There's about a 17 million or 10% set aside that is, and this is the same as ESSER 1, the same 10%, that is to be used for the most critical needs in the state as determined by the OPI. The OPI hasn't decided what to do with that $17 million as yet. The allowable uses are the same as ESSER 1. They did add categories, and it's a fairly long listing in them, I would say, for HVAC upgrades, so improving HVACs to improve airflow and improve filtration as a way of fighting the coronavirus spread. And then learning loss, a lot of concern about the idea that as schools have closed and we've all done what we can to provide education, that there's some gaps, and they added this. Now, when I first looked at this, I said, well, that's great, but I would have approved expenditures for these things in ESSER 1. And later, the Department of Education issued a document where they basically said the same thing. So I can't say that these are really new uses. They are specifically listed. And obviously, this is a way of emphasizing for the Department of Education what they think are large issues in the United States. But again, the piece that has always been difficult isn't finding one of the allowable uses, but the overarching requirement that the money be spent to prevent, prepare for, or respond to the coronavirus. So making sure that the expenditures you can clearly relate to that. I think you'll see me say this a couple of times, no equitable share, and I have a slide where I talk about this, but you do not have to calculate equitable share and go through the process of providing those services to private schools. And lastly, in here, as with ESSER 1, 0.5% of the total award can be used for grant administration by the OPI. And that's good because this is a lot more money, and we will be adding to our staff in order to try and provide the best service we can to school districts. Let me pause there because I did receive an email that said in the last webinar in November, we had talked about the issue of paying for sick leave and substitutes, and then added sick leave because of coronavirus, or having to pay out sick leave because of coronavirus. And I'd kind of said, well, I'm looking at this, I'd like to respond. And so what I'll say about this is that, again, the issue isn't, is this an allowable expense? Because really virtually any kind of expenditure you can think of, you can find that it's covered by one of the allowable uses somewhere. It's the definition that this is necessary because of the coronavirus. Specifically for the issue of paying for sick leave and then paying for substitutes who came in for sick leave. It's my opinion, and I've talked to a couple of people about this and have generally seen agreement that in a sense is double counting, that the cost of the coronavirus is either of those but if you count both, that's double counting. I would say all these other things about if there's COVID leave that was added because the government has said that you had to, or if you have leave left over because of the environment of the coronavirus, I would say that those are all allowable expenses. And the thing that I've said about all of these allowable expense decisions is that I try to give the best guidance I can to you on this. Based upon, I regularly sit in on things with the Department of Education. I'm part of a professional group where I meet with other heads of state education agencies and stuff. So I try to turn that into guidance for you the best that I can. But the real test of an allowable expense is going to be when you're audited. And it hasn't come out this way, but I can just about guarantee that if you're a school that gets a single audit for federal, because of the amount of federal funds that you get, you can guarantee that the auditor will be tasked with looking at what you've done with coronavirus funds. So let me pause there, and I can't see the chat box right now, Mindy. So do we have some questions that have come up so far?
Yes, we do have one question. Knowing there are no legislators willing to take a hold harmless bill or a 5-year A and B bill, I have been advised both ways to use ESSER 2 to support our loss of 10% of our students due to COVID-19. Can you provide more guidance? Thank you.
Sure. This is a very complicated one because in essence, you would first have to identify what is the loss due to the number of kids who have left the public system for homeschool or primarily homeschool or private school. And again, that depends upon your own unique circumstances. And again, what's going to happen as the legislature finishes their duties. And so I believe to the extent that you lose funding and you believe that the children at some point will be coming back, it's possible that you could use ESSER funds for that. Again, that would be out in the future because of the year delay for A and B driving state funding. But again, we have to see what the legislature is going to do and what are the specifics of funding. So I think this is an area that rather than, again, there's a piece of the assurances and that you signed when you agreed to take the ESSER contract that basically says you'll maintain full employment. And to, for example, back during school closures last year, when perhaps buses weren't running and bus drivers didn't have anything to do, again, it was an acceptable use of ESSER funds to keep those bus drivers employed. But again, I would say to you that this is something that's out in the future. And as we make it through the legislative session, it should be up to part of what the OPI does to try and fashion this into some guidelines for what this means. Because I really do fear that if you go out and just do this and then an auditor shows up and says, explain to me why you did this, that it may be hard to make that connection, that this was directly due to the coronavirus. So again, I'll say to you, I think that there's going to be something that you can do if there is a shortfall in funding, but I'm not sure. In fact, I have submitted the question to the Department of Education specific to levies, saying, because it's been asked by schools, if a levy fails because of the economic conditions around the coronavirus, can ESSER funds be used to replace that? And I haven't received a reply from them yet, and I've seen no guidance that they put out nationwide on it. So again, I think I'm headed that there should be a way to use ESSER funds to make up, but I think it's something you put into your planning as opposed to spending the funds right now. And there'll be some more to come on this as we see what happens in the legislature. Other questions, Mindy?
Ken, we have some questions in the chat box. I have submitted an amendment for ESSER 1 budget. How long approximately does it take to deny or approve those changes submitted in e-grants? For amendments, that's Ken, you want to answer that one?
So typically it should take less than a week. I try to keep up with them myself, and Mindy's doing some of these as well. If there's a particular issue that if I look at and say, I got to spend some time, there's some danger in this of what the amendment is, then it can take longer than that. I know that there's a couple of amendments that I've been sitting on waiting to get a reply from the Department of Education concerning guidance on the allowability of the amendment change. But right now, I think that's only 2 or 3 amendments that I'm holding up.
And I just want to jump in here about cash requests. For the way that we do them is you have to have in your cash request by the 25th of the month. Anything that's in by the 25th of the month will be paid on the 10th of the following month. So one of the things that I'd like to remind people is if you do get a note that we did not accept the cash request, that you need to, do 1 or 2 things to it, the sooner you can get them done, then I will be able to include them in the bunch that I send after the 25th. Did that answer everybody's questions?
Okay, I'm going to keep going then. And if there are questions, we can come back to them. So again, I showed you before how to get to this part of the website. And again, these are questions I think that keep coming back to me. Where's the ESSER 2 guidance? Where can I find the allocation to districts? And what do we know yet what the coding is going to be for ESSER 2? So on all these that are out there, I will say when you look at the fund coding, 2 things have changed, I think. The first is that the Department of Education is clear that the ESSER 2 money has to be tracked separately from the ESSER 1 money. And second, we were surprised when the requirements for reporting came out, and the department basically wants questions answered differently for what's referred to as the SEA reserve, SEA being State Education Agency, and the reserve being that 10% set aside. And so kind of learning a lesson in this round of funding, we actually have different coding for the reserve distributions, assuming that there are some, as opposed to the main 90% that goes out directly to schools. So that complication has been added, but hopefully added to help with the reporting in the future. I want to talk too specifically about HVAC upgrades. And again, if you look at the guidance, you will see these exact words about what is an allowable expenditure. So it's not just replace your HVAC, but it's inspection, repair, upgrading, and includes, airflow. It's pretty broad, okay? But there's also a piece of this that you have to be aware of from a project management point of view, because in the background of all this, there are the uniform regulations that govern the use of federal funds for any grant. And of course, ESSER is included. And so there's this thing that says that approved construction projects must comply with applicable uniform guidance requirements, as well as the department's regulations regarding construction, and they give a reference. And then basically say that the LEA, that's local education agency, so the school district that uses ESSER funds for construction must meet all the Davis-Bacon prevailing wage requirements and include language in the construction projects and construction contracts that all contractors or subcontractors must pay wages that are not less than those established for the locality of the project, quote, prevailing wage rates. So again, as you embark on, HVAC or any other type of construction project, you have to be aware of this and have to make sure that you adhere to these federal guidelines for the project as well. With individual school districts, when I've pointed this out, when they've made a request for this, I've always suggested that you should probably make your, whoever serving as the attorney for your district aware of this and get their advice on what that means for how you manage this project. I would also say too that, and again, I had a school district that asked the question, we have a new school being built. Can we use ESSER funds to upgrade the HVAC in that building that hasn't been built yet? And I think the answer is yes. And again, part of this would be, how do you manage that if these requirements aren't being adhered to in the building of the school? Then that might say that you treat that upgrade as a completely separate project. And again, that's why I always say that I think this requirement means that you should have a little bit of legal advice on this before you embark on it. I have no idea to the extent that auditors will come in and ask to check this when they audit your school district, but it's possible because it's clearly in already the uniform guidance. So what's the timing on this? And it's got a little more complicated this week. So the ESSER 2 funds have been already granted to the state of Montana, which means we can start drawing funds from the federal government at any moment, okay? So the funds are available, $170 million. However, there is a requirement in Montana that the state legislature authorizes federal spending. And that's done in a couple of ways. Typically, like for ESSER 1, that happened in the interim between legislatures. And the governor's office has the authority to approve grants in the interim. And then the legislature gets a bill that says okay to all those and sets the timing limits on them. But this grant was received on January 6th after the legislature had come into session. All of the coronavirus funds were added to House Bill 3, which is a bill that is for supplemental funding for funding that can be spent in the current fiscal year. However, this week in the Senate Finance Claims, all of the OPI ESSER funding and a lot of the other coronavirus funds were deleted from House Bill 3 with the idea that when agencies review their budgets for next year, we are going to be asked to review our plans for these coronavirus funds. And it's possible that these will be added to House Bill 2. It's a different ways it could go as far as how it gets authorized. But the point is that we cannot distribute any funds until the legislature authorizes it. And the timing of that is up in the air right now. Legislators certainly understand the urgency. But again, this is just a wrinkle that wasn't expected and could delay when the funds are actually available. And the other thing is that we do have to go through e-grants, and we're in the process of trying to get the module set up and get it running. The funds must be spent by September of 2023. And a big part of this that I hope is going to alleviate the anxiety about when are these new funds going to be available is we do encourage you to exhaust all of the ESSER 1 funds. And, as of the end of December, out of the $40 million, a little over $40 million that were awarded to school districts out of that pot of money, we had only distributed $5 million. And for perfectly good reasons. I understand that when the governor's coronavirus funds came out, school districts pulled back from drawing down the ESSER 1 funds. But what that means is there are still a lot of funds available from ESSER 1. And we would like you to exhaust all those funds before drawing down ESSER 2, because again, there really should be no difference in the allowable uses of either of those two pots. So when you go into e-grants, what's going to happen? Well, I think when we've talked about this with the vendor, we've said, we really just want everybody to acknowledge that what they affirmed, there's that whole list of things saying you'll do this, you'll do that, that are the federal regulations. But hopefully the only thing we'll put in is just an acknowledgement that they're all still in effect. You will have to submit a budget for the ESSER 2 funds. What I will say is that, the policy we're following with ESSER 1 is there really is no deadline on when you have to fix your budget. As I've said, you can amend your budget up until the day the grant ends to give you all the flexibility that you can. A big piece in here is that, when we set up the budget for ESSER 1, we tried to, match the allowable uses that were put into the statute. And then we got the reporting request, and they had boiled it down to, I think it's 6 categories for reporting of money. And so this module, we will have the purpose codes match the reporting codes that the department has put into effect, to hopefully make it easier for preparing the annual reports, where again, as you budget into these purpose codes and you spend, the budgets and what you actually spend should be pretty close together. Part of this too is that there is a clause in here in the statute that says within 6 months, we have to report what we're going to do with the money that we've gotten. And the solution to that for us is we will use what you guys put into your budgets for describing what the money is going to be used for. And did I mention yet that there's no equitable share because of time? Let me get through this next slide and then I'll pause, okay? Because it's directly related to this. So for non-public schools, why is there no equitable share, okay? And it's because in the second line here, Congress added funding to the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, which is called GEAR, for non-public schools. So for Montana, there is $12.8 million that is earmarked for non-public schools. And again, as this is put into the legislation that was passed, it is given to the state education agency to administer the applications of the private schools and homeschools for the money and distributing the funds, not school districts. And I will say that having looked at this and knowing this is coming our way and having spent a couple of hours on the phone with Jack O'Connor, I would say there's still a lot to figure out for this. And this is going to be a primary of work to get this up and running for private schools to apply for this. Let me pause there and see if there's any questions.
Ken, there are several questions in the chat Are you able to access them, or would you like me to read them?
Could you read them, please?
Sure. The first one, the money for bus drivers and other classified staff were already allocated. So we didn't need to use ESSER 1 funds for that. This year with the new legislative session, it will be different. And the loss of A and B is not the same as people not working last spring. The disbursement of money went by Title I and the amounts vary greatly. Need a definitive as to whether we can use it for personnel.
So my answer is that ESSER funds can certainly be used for personnel. And again, the challenge is always trying to meet that allowable use of directly related to the coronavirus funds. And I would say right now that I don't feel like we know what's going to happen in the legislature with funding from the state, nor do we know exactly what's going to happen with funding for next year. Again, I know that everybody in the fall count saw substantial decreases, not everybody, but lots. And whether there will be any change for the spring count, we'll know in a month or so. But the added complication is that if we see a return of kids to school next year, there is the ability to apply for both anticipated and unanticipated A and B increases. So I don't think there's a simple answer to this, that as the legislature goes on and we see what's going to happen to state funding for education, and as we get through the rest of the school year, we're going to have to pull together some guidance on what really is allowable for schools to do. So I understand that you'd like to get the answer right this second, but I just don't think that that's possible. Mindy.
This one I think we've answered. Can the money be used for HVAC in new construction? And I think you answered that, Ken, as yes, correct?
Yeah, to the extent that, again, this is, as it said, to the extent that you're doing this, you're adding cost for the HVAC with the idea of improved airflow and filtration and that kind of stuff. Yes.
Okay. Will those wages need to meet the executive order for $15 an hour? Basically, are these federal funds under the same scrutiny as the EO?
I would say that's a darn good question that I haven't thought about at all. So try and find out.
And then you got a thank you, Ken. So that was nice.
Okay.
Is there a requirement for getting bids for a HVAC replacement project under these federal guidelines?
Yes, there is.
Okay. Mindy, can you tell me what an ESSER subgrant is? School nutrition or transportation, or so the ESSER subgrant is the main ESSER money that you got, whereas the SEA funds were your related expenses for ESSER.
Right, the related services grant.
Services,
Right.
thank you.
Yeah.
Couldn't remember that word. Doesn't look like there's any more in here.
Okay. So back to you, Mindy, for this next section.
Okay, so as you know, with all good things, there's no such thing as a free lunch. So one of the things that we have to set up is a monitoring system for the funds being spent through ESSER. And they have given us a general guideline of what we are doing for the monitoring. So we've taken that and put it together in a monitoring plan. And what we'll be looking for is, one, if there is any sort of corrective actions, and since this is the first year of the grant, first round, we probably won't have anything like that, but we will for a second round. So if there is some sort of corrective action, we would need to look at and see if you have made any strides towards correcting that. The second thing is that we're going to look at reconciling the accounting system transaction with cash draws. This is where we will be asking for supporting documentation. And what we will do is we will choose a month during that time span and ask you for the supporting documents during that specific month. Now, we also are going to look for an inventory of any equipment purchased with grant funds. One of the pages I am trying to add to next to the ESSER 2 grant is a equipment purchase inventory log. And so though we don't have one now, we expect that you'll be keeping track of the inventory that you received. In reading the federal guidelines, just so you know, with equipment that has been purchased with federal grant funds, once the grant is ended, the ESSER grant, that equipment can be kept by the district and used for other program materials. But you need to make sure that you keep track and you have proven that the first grant is no longer in force, so you can repurpose the equipment. We will look at a documentation of, did you speak with your private and home schools to see if they needed services and how you accomplished that communication. And then the last thing is we're going to be looking for how you're going to spend the remaining funds. We realize the gear kind of threw a step into it, and so a lot of you are having to redo amendments on your grants. So just keep in mind, as those funds are sitting in there, one of the things we will be asking is, what are your future plans for those funds? Can you go to the next slide, Ken, please? So who are we monitoring? Well, you will see on the left-hand side that there is a monitoring plan that goes according to award size, and each school falls into one of those categories there. Now, for the schools that have been 25,000 and below, which is the majority of the schools, we have to do a 10% random sampling of for every 2 years. We have the 33% random sample for 25 through 50K. So after doing all those stats and randomized numbers and picking and stuff, we have the first set of schools that will we'll be doing a monitoring within the next month or two. We will give you approximately, what did we decide, Ken, 4 to 6 weeks to gather the documentation once we send you the official letter. So all the schools that are on this current list have expended funds. So we know that they have expended funds, and they will have the documentation that we need. As soon as we've gotten these schools notified and underway with the paperwork, we will then put out our next list. Right now, we have not signed off on all the forms and specific requests that we have, but I expect we'll get that done in the next week or two, and then you'll have official notification, including the documents that you'll need to use and the procedures that you'll need to follow. Does anyone have any questions about the monitoring?
So, let me add a few words here. I put together this plan back in July and August because it was a requirement of the grant. And I really took a lot from the basic monitoring form and stuff from Title I. And, it's unfortunately a requirement for these grants that the state does take an interest and do these kinds of monitoring things. And again, I'd say, unfortunately, I was at a meeting of this professional organization that belonged to a board meeting. And two of the states who were there, Kansas and Massachusetts, have participated in a little pilot program that the Department of Education has put together for them deciding what is it that they're going to do when they audit states and what guidance they give to auditors for schools for the ESSER funds. And the brief description from Massachusetts and Kansas who participated in this is that it's going to be a bear. So unfortunately, I have to tell you that this program has been put together based upon, and it was approved by the department, based upon kind of the standards that we've used for Title I in the past. But there's a chance that particularly for ESSER 2, there could be more requirements on the state for monitoring, of course, which will eventually fall upon you guys. So I hate to have that kind of note, but that's what we've heard is coming. So now I'll pause again. Any other questions?
I have some from the chat box. Can a switch from carpeting to vinyl, easier to clean and disinfect, use ESSER 2 funds? Additionally, classroom furniture that is easier to space out and or clean.
I believe both of those would be allowable expenses. Again, part of what your demonstration is that you have a basis for doing this to prevent or respond to coronavirus, right? That again, you've got something that says this is a good thing for preventing spread of germs and stuff. But that sure sounds allowable to me.
Okay. Should we be tracking inventory for both ESSER 1 or ESSER 2 or just the new grant? I mean, just good best practices of, that you should be tracking any inventory that you purchase.
Yeah, I want to be careful about inventory here because we're talking about inventory of equipment. And I think the standard we would use is that it would have to cost $5,000 or more.
Right.
So we're not talking about every mop that you bought, but rather equipment that cost over $5,000. And you have to have it for both ESSER 1 and ESSER 2.
It would be nice if the schools who have to do title program audits this spring would not be required to do this as well.
Let me take a look at that. I don't have the schedule of what the title audits are, but if we can accommodate that, we'll make an attempt. We may not be able to.
In filling out ESSER 1 annual report, we needed to, through what date do we need? Oh, okay, for filling out the ESSER survey, we're talking through September 30th. You're welcome for clarification. Are there monitoring requirements for both ESSER 1 and 2? And if so, are there no equal sharing requirements? Why are those expectations in the monitoring? The expectation about the equal share is in the monitoring of of the ESSER 1, since that was in there. We have not received anything from the feds yet about what the monitoring requirements will be for ESSER 2. And obviously, go ahead, Ken.
So again, when we first got the ESSER 1 funds, we had to fill out an application for our state and file it. And included in there was an assurance that we would present a control and monitoring plan by a certain date to the department, which we did. But with the second round for ESSER 2, we didn't have to apply for the funds. We got an email saying the award has been granted to you. The funds are available. So really, the control and monitoring plan for ESSER 1 is still in effect for ESSER 2. The feds are really treating this like it's just another segment of funding that's coming, as opposed to a new grant, even though they do require that the tracking of the money be separate. So as we go into these monitoring visits throughout the life of the grant, we'll be looking at both pieces of money in the same monitoring or desk audit that we do. Other questions, Mindy?
There's none in the chat, so we can open it up to the floor.
Yeah, and meanwhile, I'll advance to the last slide that is just a listing of different resources that you might use, that you might have. But we'll be glad to sit here for a minute or two to see if there are any other questions.
Ken, this is Christy Jacobs from Harrison Bozeman. I know we spoke about this next week, but I just want to mention it again, that with the 10%, because our school, I did the math, and our school is only getting $50 per student, while the larger districts around us are averaging $450 to $500 per student with the current grant. And we have no, because with the Title I and the way the money is being spent, our costs are equal trying to keep a school open. So as OPI looks at that last 10% most critical needs, I hope they take this into consideration.
Thank you, Christy. And again, when I say that the OPI hasn't decided on what to do with the $17 million, the reason is because that we're considering different ideas for what to do with the money that would best serve the state. So I think that the idea that, like we did last time, of saying there's a certain amount as a minimum that every school should get, is one of the ideas that's being considered. But again, when that decision is made, we'll be coming out with the program for all the schools. So, you know, I think there's an acknowledgement of the issue that you described, Christy.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate the acknowledgement. And as I said, as I spoke to you before, it looks like Cal said on the chat that he spoke to Elsie about it. And if there's other things from those of us who are in this situation would be useful to do, please let us know.
Yeah.
We do have another question now. We do have another question right now in the chat. If we did not do a cash request before the 30th, then we should state no to receiving funds in the sub-grants and put 0 in the rest of the report, and that is correct. Except don't put the zeros in your FTEs, because that's what they really want. So where can I find FTE figures? Isn't that something that would come from the schools itself, Ken?
Yes.
Anyone else?
So I'll say thank you to everyone for attending this. Again, this question of what's going to happen with funding and can you use ESSER funds to make up for shortfall and that kind of stuff, I think is the biggest issue that we as an agency are going to deal with over the next month. But in the meantime, if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to call Mindy or I. And thanks again for participating today. Bye now.